Alright, I am back with another video, and, well, this is a bit of a weird one. This was originally supposed to be a Hellboy-inspired build, as I wanted to make this video for Halloween, as well as the fact that it was requested by a viewer on the channel, and I thought, actually, that sounds like an interesting one to do. And then I tried to make the build, and I just couldn't make something I was happy with. At the end of the day, Hellboy's skill set is surprisingly basic. Like, don't get me wrong, there could have been some interesting ways I could have spun it, but in terms of making a good Baldur's Gate 3 build that accurately represents the character, I just wasn't happy with it. At the end of the day, I had a mostly monk build, which had small dips into barbarian and warlock, and maybe I could have done a bit more of that concept, and maybe I'll revisit it in the future, but as I was making that build, I kind of stumbled across something else that I really wanted to try. So while this build still has some Hellboy inspiration, it's not a Hellboy build, which is why I've decided to rename it. Basically, the idea of this build is to kind of use the Hellfire hand crossbow buffed with fire damage to get some interesting interactions with the heat mechanic, plus some range damage options from things like Arcane Archer and eventually Swarmkeeper Rogue, to be able to basically stack up a massive amount of fire and piercing damage, as well as a little bit of like other damage types, mainly force, here and there, to really just go for a massive amount of blitz damage. Basically, the idea is that you just, like Hellboy, have this massive ass gun that just does a hell of a lot of damage, and that's kind of the fantasy. You just have this big gun that does big damage, and that's kind of the whole point. And again, you kind of get a bit of the Hellfire theming here and there, and I don't know, I feel like it actually kind of turns into a rather interesting playstyle that I wasn't really expecting to synergize quite so well. And the build, despite being a ranged build, works really well in close range and proper range as well, far range, because once you get into close range, that's where you kind of get to do a really powerful point blank shot, which does even more damage. So you kind of get to play like this fantasy of just being the guy with the big gun, right? And I kind of like that idea. Now, don't get me wrong, there's places where this build could be improved. For example, if you used dual crossbows, for most of this build, that would be a massive improvement. Don't get me wrong, because honestly, like, dual crossbows would just be a higher damage output overall, but I like that kind of character fantasy of just being the guy with the big gun. So that's kind of what I'm going for today. So, without further ado, let's get into the build. Okay, so first up, we're going to be starting with level 1 of Fighter. This is going to give us a few things right off the bat that I am going to want for this build, namely Constitution saving throw proficiency, as there is a Constitution-based spell which I do want to make use of in this build. Secondly, obviously things like fighting styles, the ability to use any weapon and armor, as we are going to go for a bit of a mix here, although this is mostly a dexterity-focused build, so you will be able to use kind of any type of armor without really needing to worry about your stat distribution so much. And since we're mostly going for levels in Fighter, we're actually going to get a total of 4 feats in this build, so I mean, it's going to work out pretty well for us, but starting with Fighter is always going to be the way to go here, because again, that con save is actually going to be not majorly important, but there's only really one spell that we're going to be concentrating on consistently, and it does help out our damage to have that up, so we're going to want it here. But yeah, starting off with Fighter, that's going to give us a bunch of things that I've already mentioned. We're also going to get Second Wind for a bit of bonus action healing, which is always nice. Obviously, because of the fact that this was originally a Hellboy build, I did go over Tiefling, which feels on theme for what I'm going for here, giving us fire resistance and natural dark vision, as well as the average movement speed. And I did go with an Asmodeus Tiefling, but honestly, any racial option will work for you. Doesn't have to be a Tiefling, doesn't have to be an Asmodeus Tiefling. Pretty much pick whatever you like here. For the background, I did go with the Urchin, because this is going to be a high dexterity build. We're going to have sleight of hand and stealth basically built into our kit, which is always nice to have. And as a fighter, we do get to choose a fighting style at level 1, and let's be real, we're going to want to go with Archery right off the bat. We're going to want to dive into the ranged weapons pretty much straight away, and in the very early game, just picking up any old crossbow will do the trick. Hell, if you've got a bard starting in your party as well, I mean, just take theirs. What are they going to do? They're just going to insult everybody anyway, so just take their crossbow. They're not going to mind. But, of course, if you are going with the dual-wield crossbow route, you're going to want to pick up 2-weapon fighting somewhere within the build. We'll have an opportunity to pick up either of these fighting styles later on in the build if you so choose, so don't worry about getting this now if you don't want to start with dual crossbows, but if you are starting with dual crossbows, you can go with 2-weapon fighting here, but otherwise start off with Archery, because it is obviously going to help us out by giving us a +2 bonus to ranged weapon attacks. Now, for our ability scores, pretty standard spread for a dexterity-based fighter, with a bit of a twist. Dexterity is at 16, obviously this is going to be our main attacking modifier. Constitution is at 14, mainly because we're a ranged character. Most of the time, unless we do decide to go in close, we're not going to have to worry about taking too many attacks. But since we're mostly playing martials here, our HP is still going to round out to over 100 by the time this build is done on Tactician, so overall, pretty decent HP score of 14, and you may be thinking, but what about the aforementioned Constitution saving throw? Well, yeah, that is true, we do want to maintain concentration on a certain spell, but I'll be honest, even with how this build is set up, I had my concentration set to 14, and was taking hits left, right, and center, and the only thing that made me drop concentration was being knocked prone, which is a guaranteed drop of concentration. So I'm not exactly sure what was going on there. I might have missed something in the build. I kind of tested it a bit quickly because this was a last minute change to the build. But really, we are maintaining concentration pretty consistently even with a 14, so... But anyways, intelligence is at 16 because we are going to be an Arcane Archer, and as such, the Arcane Archer arrows do have a spell save DC for their effects, which is based off of intelligence, so I want that here. And wisdom is at 12. This is because we are going to be incorporating some ranger levels into the build. However, we don't really need wisdom for the spells that we're going to be casting, but it's still nice to have a bit, because the saving throws can be a bit nasty. Strength and charisma are both at 8, but feel free to change those up as you like. Like I say, we don't actually really need wisdom on this build so much, so if you wanted to put that 12 in wisdom into any of the other skills, you could do so instead. Moving on to our skill proficiencies, obviously we've got sleight of hand and stealth, as aforementioned from our background, and I've gone for perception and intimidation from our skills. Unfortunately, we're not really going to be a charisma-based character with this one, we're more about shoot first, ask questions later, so while we are very intimidating, we're probably not going to be exactly coming up with very clever threats. But yes, that is level 1. At level 2 of Fighter, we're going to be getting our hands on Action Surge, giving us the ability to gain an extra action once per short rest. Obviously, from big Nova damage burst rounds, this is perfect. We're going to be able to take one turn of just doing absolutely immaculate damage. So, obviously, this is great on any build. At Fighter level 3, we do get to choose our subclass, and because we're playing as an Asmodeus Tiefling, I do get Hellish Rebuke here as a quick little reaction-based spell, but not a huge deal. But yes, we are going to be going with Arcane Archer today, because we're going to get a few things. Namely, we're going to get a cantrip. Now, Guidance would be an obvious pick here if you don't already have a cleric in your party, as this would help with any of our ability checks that we're making outside of combat mostly, which is going to be good if we do end up having to take on some dialogue options. I mean, if you're playing this, you're probably playing Tav, which means you are playing the main character, so Guidance could be pretty good. Otherwise, though, I would say Light, completely useless, we have Dark Vision, or True Strike if you're going the dual-wielding route, because if you decide to wield the Hellfire Hand crossbow in your offhand and just have a random ass crossbow in your main hand, but technically you can cast True Strike as an action and then attack as a bonus action with guaranteed advantage. This will become irrelevant later in the build, but sometimes it's nice to say, hey, True Strike actually technically has a very niche use in this build. God, I wish I was playing with the 2024 version of the spell. It is so much better. But yeah, for general use and a lack of clerics, take Guidance. And now for the arcane shots, and this is where I have a bit of a disagreement of Arcane Archer, because I love all of these. I do. I really, really do, and it makes it hard to pick so precious few. It's the same argument I have with Battlemaster every time, because there's so many that I like. But there are some that I think are clear standouts for this build. But let me go over all of the options available to you, and you can make an informed decision for yourself. First up, we have Arcane Shot, Banishing Arrow. Allows you to do a bit of piercing damage and potentially banish a target to the Feywild. Honestly, this is probably my least favourite. You don't really get any extra damage like some of the other arrow types that you can use, and as such, this one just feels a bit flat on the damage side, whereas a banishing effect is nice. It doesn't last long enough really for me to think it's too relevant. Next up, Beguiling Arrow. Psychic damage is a very interesting damage type to put on a crossbow, and it can also charm enemies potentially, which again, kind of nice, not my first pick though. Bursting Arrow is one I definitely like as being the man with the big gun, dealing an extra bit of 2d6 force damage against targets within 3 meters, so if you've got enemies clumped up together, well, bam! Just be careful though, this can hit your friends, and if you are close up, it can hit you, so be a bit careful. Moving on to Enfeebling Arrow. This one is an interesting one. First up, it does necrotic damage, which I think is a unique damage type as well, and it also can inflict Feeble. Feeble makes it so their weapon attacks only deal half damage. This can be amazing for if you've got someone in the party who is tanking, or hell, even yourself, meaning that they can take way more damage from your average guy who's just swinging a weapon around. Very, very nice effect, and I think it's somewhat underrated. Grasping Arrow deals poison damage, which can be a bit meh, but the affected entity's movement speed will be reduced and it will take slashing damage when it moves. So it's kind of like a weird booming blade that uses poison and slashing damage. So again, probably another underrated option. Is a strength save though, and a lot of endgame enemies will be passing strength saves pretty damn easily. Same with Enfeebling Arrow being a con save. You always got to look at those saving throws. But this will be our first option guaranteed. Seeking Arrow only does 1d6 of force damage as opposed to Bursting Arrow. However, not only can this possibly inflict Fairy Fire, giving us advantage on subsequent shots, which is going to feel really, really nice on this build, this initial shot, Seeking Arrow, always hits its target. It does not miss. And for those of you who already know we're taking Sharpshooter in this build, this is a very nice thing to have. Not only giving us advantage, but also guaranteeing our first arrow is going to hit and deals extra force damage. In my personal opinion, for the vast majority of builds that are going to be using Arcane Archer that are going to take Sharpshooter, this is the bog standard arrow you've got to pick, and we're definitely taking it on this build. And again, come on, who doesn't love the idea of like a gun or a crossbow or an arrow or like a bow and arrow that has the shots trace their opponent, like Hawkeye or the Emperor from JoJo's. Like, there's a ton of cool things you can do with this. Absolutely love it. We also have Shadow Arrow, deals psychic damage, and if the enemy fails their wisdom save, they become blinded. Blinded is amazing for a ranged character to inflict, because if you're up against other ranged characters, you can shoot them, but they can't shoot you. Personally, I did use this one in my testing, and I was quite happy with the results, so we're going to be taking it here. And finally, Piercing Arrow. Deals an extra d6 of piercing damage, and using Transmutation Magic, you can attack all people within a line of your shot. Each target must succeed a dex save, or be dealt an additional bit of damage as well. So, this is a weird one, okay? So this is probably one of the weaker options we can get. 99% of the time. Most builds probably don't take Piercing Arrow, because it's not very likely that your opponents are all going to be lined up nice in a row for you, and the extra piercing damage is the most likely to get resisted out of all the damage types. But picture this. Again, imagine you got Hellboy, his big gun, and he's got a group of demons in front of him, and he just, boom, he blasts them, and the camera pans to just the big gaping hole that's been left in the enemy's chest, and you can see the other enemy that was in front of that enemy through that hole, and they also have a hole, and Hellboy's standing in the hole. It's like a James Bond type frame. Come on, you guys know the visual, the vision. And again, because this build is going to be able to make a damn good use out of piercing damage, because we're going to be making enemies vulnerable to it, this is actually a solid pick. Not my first choice, probably not anybody's first choice, but the fantasy of it is just so good. I actually quite like Arcane Archer, if you couldn't tell. But yes, I would definitely say for now I'm going to be taking that Bursting Arrow alongside Seeking and Shadow, just to give us a pretty solid kit. A guaranteed shot, an AoE shot, and a shot that can take out other ranged kind of fighters. Basically does all of the work in those three picks. The rest are kind of just fun flavor choices, which you can pick from. But these are definitely the core three that I would go with. Right, that is level 3. A lot of explanation on that one, but trust me, it makes sense. Right, moving on, we get to choose our first feat of the build, and this is where I would say we have a bit of a conundrum. A lot of people, they're going to want that damage. They're going to want to take Sharpshooter first, and with Seeking Arrow, even with a middling dexterity score like 16, you're going to be pretty much guaranteed to hit, especially if that Fairy Fire goes off. But that is a risk-reward system. If that Fairy Fire doesn't go off, yes, you've got that first shot in guaranteed, but then subsequent shots could be a bit tricky, and again, you're going to feel that lack of a boosted dexterity. Now, don't get me wrong, you could get some early game items like the Graceful Cloth, even though we're not using an armored defense, we don't have any form of an armored defense, so you'd be lacking in the AC department, you're a ranged character, you could potentially make up for it, so really, you kind of got to pick and choose. And I think, for now, we're just going to go with that ability score improvement. I don't think, at level 4, you don't need Sharpshooter damage yet. This build is still going to be effective with the extra damage types. And again, we have limited arcane shots. We have a finite resource of them, and we need to ration those out properly during combat. So spending them on Seeking Arrow every turn, just to guarantee that we're going to get it for Sharpshooter shot, doesn't feel right to me just yet. But again, we're a fighter. We're going to get that Sharpshooter pretty soon. Moving on to fighter level 5, we now finally have extra attack, meaning we can make 2 shots in a turn, which means our chances of hitting things have gone up exponentially. We're also going to get the darkness spell at this level, so if you are playing an Asmodeus Tiefling like I am and you want to grab the Eversight Ring, well, once per long rest you could just be a problem. You could just be a damn right problem firing out your highly powerful arcane arrows, either at point blank range or at range, just from your Cloud of Darkness and just be an issue. I mean, Eldritch Blast, Darkness, Devil's Sight, you know all the shenanigans. It's possible, it's cool, so feel free if you do go for Asmodeus Tiefling. But yeah, other than that, not really much else for level 5, but hey, extra attack, more than good enough. At fighter level 6, we're going to be able to grab another feat for the build. And at this point, yeah, you are going to be taking Sharpshooter because we kind of want that damage. Our ranged weapon attacks no longer receive penalties from high ground rules, meaning that we're not going to be at disadvantage if we're aiming from down below. And ranged weapon attacks with weapons you are proficient with have a -5 penalty to their attack roll, but could potentially deal an extra 10 damage if they hit. And you can toggle it on and off at any time, so it's like how much you actually want to aim versus how much you want to do damage. And again, for point blank, once we get Crossbow Expert, spoiler alert, this will be pretty damn good. But yeah, level 6, solid level for us. Now at this point, you've got a choice to make. You could keep going in fighter now, or you could swap into the ranger levels that we're about to take to get some extra aspects to our kit. And since I do want to kind of like fit in some of the ranger stuff a bit earlier on, I'll go to ranger for now and then come back to the last bits of fighter later. Because right now we kind of have everything we want from fighter. For the most part. I mean, don't get me wrong, this extra stuff is going to be lovely, but we can get it a bit later. But feel free to take the fighter levels now if you choose. I just kind of want to show off the ranger stuff just to break things up a little bit. So yes, ranger. What are we going to do with ranger? Well, let's find out. First off, we're going to gain access to a favored enemy feature, allowing us to pick one of these 5 little buffs to give ourselves. Now, most of these, unfortunately, aren't really relevant to us. All of the ones that give armor proficiency, like Ranger Knight, we don't need. We started off as fighter. We also got things like Magebreaker, which can give us True Strike, which is... I don't know. Not a huge fan on that one. Keeper of the Veil, no. Honestly, Bounty Hunter will be our best pick. Gives us proficiency in investigation, which, if you're still keeping with the slight Hellboy vibe that we have, he is a paranormal investigator, and with a decent intelligence, that investigation skill is actually going to feel pretty damn nice. As for our natural explorer feature, obviously, you could take fire here if you're not playing a tiefling and still have the fire resistance. Obviously, fits the theme, we're using fire quite a bit. Same with Wasteland Wanderer Cold, probably the best option to take here, giving you another common damage type that you can resist. Poison is also a good one. But yeah, coming out of this with 2 resistances is nice. And by multiclassing into Ranger, we get access to an additional proficiency. Again, Hellboy was a paranormal investigator. This isn't a Hellboy build, but I'm kind of basing it off of his personality. So we'll grab Insight, because we can then tell when people are lying to us. Or intelligent, you see. At Ranger, level 2, not only do we get access to our spellcasting, we gain access to a fighting style. Now again, at this point, you could be picking up 2-weapon fighting to dual-wield crossbows, because obviously that would be a more powerful option, but again, we're kind of going for that single big gun vibe, so I'm not going to be taking that here. Otherwise, dueling could work, I mean, if you decide to use a melee weapon, but honestly, defense, just giving us a bit of a bump to our AC, is always nice. The best part, if we want to maintain concentration, the best way to do that is not being hit. Moving on though to our spell selection, and obviously the most important spell that we're going to be taking here is Hunter's Mark. This is 99% of the time what we're going to be concentrating on. It gives us an additional d6 of piercing damage whenever we hit our marked target, as long as we make the concentration. And we can use a bonus action to mark a new creature without expending a spell slot, as long as we don't drop concentration and the creature we marked dies. Basically, this is the only thing we need to concentrate on, and as such, we can basically just pop this on and hit that opponent with our arcane arrows for just a ton of damage. Because again, we're going to be stacking on Hunter's Mark, Sharpshooter, the additional arcane shot damage, as well as the additional damage that we're going to be getting when we are able to double the piercing damage. We just have so much going for us. Definitely worth it. As for your second kind of spell here, I would go with Ensnaring Strike. Yes, it is a concentration roll, but it is going to be helpful in niche situations where we can ensnare our target. And remember, those targets have disadvantage on the saving throw thanks to our Bounty Hunter feature. Basically, they take a bit of piercing damage every turn, and attack rolls against that creature have advantage, which obviously helps with Sharpshooter, so you know what, it's a pretty good pick. But yeah, that's what I'd select for now. And at level 3, we get to choose our subclass. Now, obviously, Hunter Ranger works pretty well here. Beastmaster doesn't. Gloomstalker kind of does. That Dread Ambusher can be a nasty feature, but for consistent damage, I want Swarmkeeper, plus some additional things here and there. Now, this is obviously where the Hellboy inspiration starts to dip a little bit, but if you want to say these are kind of like Locusts of Avernus or something, I mean, hell, you can flavor it however you like, but Swarmkeeper is going to give us a pretty damn cool set of abilities to work with, and also it's the newest of the subclasses, and obviously we want to play with the new toy. So, with Swarmkeeper, we're going to gain access to a few things. Number 1. Our Swarm will deal additional damage to creatures marked by our Hunter's Mark. Again, why we want Hunter's Mark up? It's even more damage. We're also going to gain access to Mage Hand, which is meant to be flavored as our Swarm of Bees or whatever, which is what we're going to be taking, lifting up things for us, which I find amazing. And also Fairy Fire. We're not going to be actively concentrating on this one. I'd much rather get Fairy Fire from our ability that we get from Seeking Arrow, but still nice to have in the situations where it might be available to use. We also do gain another spell here, as well as we're going to be grabbing Hail of Thorns, because again, it's just another kind of special arrow that we can use that uses our spell slots, so might as well. Deals a decent chunk of piercing damage and a kind of range, so why not? And finally, the Gathered Swarm. You have 3 options here. First up, Flurry of Moths. Used in one of my most popular builds of all time. These ones are pretty damn cool. They can deal psychic damage, blind an enemy, or teleport us, which is pretty cool. Next up would be the Cloud of Jellyfish, which deals lightning damage, can shock your enemies, so, you know, preventing them from taking reactions, and also teleport. They can all teleport you, okay? But of course, we're going for Legion of Bees. Bees deal piercing damage, which we're going to be able to take advantage of, can push the enemy away from you, or teleport you. All of these are preferable for a highly ranged build such as us. Obviously piercing, that extra damage is going to add on to what we're able to do with our big gun blast. We're now infusing it with bee energy, making it even more powerful. Actually, I like the idea of, like, again, kind of going on another JoJo's reference, where, like, it's a bit like, what are they called? Sex Pistols? Where, like, it's literally the bees, like, pushing the bullet forward and, like, redirecting it in midair. Oh, that's kind of cool. This could have been a JoJo's build. Oh well. Very few people probably get that reference at this point. But anyways, yes, we're going to go with the Legion of Bees to deal extra piercing damage and potentially push enemies away from us. Pushing enemies away and teleporting kind of do the same thing for us, just getting us out of attack of opportunity range, but hey, still can work well for us. But yeah, that is overall everything that we want from Swarmkeeper for now. Now, we might as well take the 4th level of Ranger to grab that extra feat. No reason not to. I don't really see a reason to go to level 9 of Fighter in this build, so we're going to go for level 4 of Swarmkeeper to grab us the Crossbow Expert feat. Whenever you make a crossbow attack within melee range, the attack rolls do not have disadvantage, and also your piercing shot can inflict gaping wounds for twice as long. So, up until now, we've had many ways of giving ourselves advantage, so you could still go for that point-blank shot, it would just be made with a neutral chance, but now we guarantee that advantage on close-range attacks with Crossbow Expert. Really, maybe some people would have wanted to get this sooner, but it's up to you. Gaping Wounds is kind of a niche thing, not really something I'm going to go for very often, but hey, it still works as damage over time. Ranger level 5, we're not doing that. We're going back to Fighter. To level 7, it's going to give us access to another Arcane Arrow, so we have another one of those shots, as well as 2 amazing features. Magical Arrow, making it so all of our ranged attacks are now magical to overcome resistance. Very, very nice. As well as Curving Shot. Whenever you miss with any magical ranged attack, use a bonus action to attack the next closest target with the same attack. So no matter what, our attacks are hitting all the time now. Pretty damn powerful as long as we have the bonus action to spend. And we get to choose another Arcane Arrow. And again, there are so many good options here. Again, Piercing Arrow might not be everybody's favourite, but I really do like it for the fantasy of this build, and I made an argument for it earlier, so I'm going to take it even if it's maybe not the strongest option. Obviously, pick your favourite here. And finally, at Fighter level 8, we get our final feat of the build, rounding out to a nice 100 HP. Very nice. But obviously, it's kind of up to you what you want to take here. There are so many things that would work well for us here. You've got things like Lucky to be able to reroll your die. You've got things like Mobile for more movement speed. You've got things like Tough for more HP. There's so many things you could go for here. Just basically, you have a free feat at this level to do whatever you want with. Personally, though, I would take an ability score improvement. Now, obviously, you can max out your dexterity here, make your shots basically guaranteed to hit. However, I do think bumping up your intelligence at this stage of the game is a good idea, as the spell save DCs are going to get easier and easier for opponents to save on, and just by bumping up their intelligence just that little bit, it'll make them a bit harder. Yes, it means we don't have a maxed out dexterity or intelligence score, but I've actually found that well-rounded kind of 18 stat builds do work in this game, so I think that overall, you're going to be pretty comfortable with this choice. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a damn strong character. At the end of the day, you're going to be hitting people pretty damn hard with Sharpshooter. Our weakest possible attack is out here doing 1d6 plus 16 piercing damage, which in fact would actually deal an extra 1d4. I'll get to that in a bit. So overall, at minimum, you're doing like at least like 18 damage, which is pretty good for a single attack. And that's if you roll 2 1s on your extra D die. Like, that's pretty awesome. So overall, it's a strong build. I mean, we all know Sharpshooter, Great Weapon Master, is pretty strong, but you're getting guaranteed hits with the ability to give yourself advantage with things like Seeking Arrow, big burst AoE with Bursting Arrow, blinding ranged fighters, so they're basically useless with Shadow Arrow, and even just the absolute raw energy of blasting multiple people with a single arrow with Piercing Arrow. Like, I know, again, it's not the perfect choice, but it's still fun, god damn it. But of course, you get Hunter's Mark for more damage. You get Ensnaring Strike and Hail of Thorns for more kind of like battlefield control. You got Second Wind to heal yourself. And again, this is all before we even talk about the equipment. But I feel like before we even get to the equipment, a class fantasy of just being the big guy with the big gun has already been achieved here. Like, we are just hitting like an absolute truck and have so many different ways to hit like an absolute truck. And this build is highly customizable with all four feats available to us, the extra one being from Fighter, as well as having the ability to choose your shot types and even choose your ranger spells to an extent. Like, you just have so, like just this little bit of freedom, to tweak it just how you like it. And I personally think that's awesome. We're also coming out of this thanks to our fighter level with 7 arcane shots that recover on a short rest, which just means we can basically use these things as much as we want now. There's not really a limit. 3 level 1 spell slots is a bit meh. It means that we're really going to be only using Hunter's Mark 3 times per short rest, so you really got to make those uses, per long rest, sorry. So you really got to make those uses of it count, but if you do, you're locked in, you've got that consistent source of damage. This build is definitely going to be a boss beater, rather than something that's going to be doing consistently, like, across, like, multiple encounters, because, again, you do, if you want to get the maximum amount of damage, you technically need those spell slots, but I guess the difference is 1d6, 2d6, you know, whatever, like, depending on how you're able to play. Like, it's not a huge deal, so maybe it's not too bad, but overall, in the encounters that I tested this in, it performed pretty damn consistently. So yeah, I like it quite a lot. But yes, moving on to the equipment, and there's a lot to talk about here. So, obviously one of the main gimmicks of this build is playing off the heat mechanic, hence the name of the build. So, I really wanted to give us a bunch of ways to be able to build up that heat. So, let's talk about it. Now, obviously, while our main focus of this build is not going to be using melee weapons, I do still want to have that option available to us, because there's no reason why we shouldn't. So you've got 2 options. First up is the Thermodynamo Axe, can be obtained in Act 2, and whenever you deal damage with this weapon, you gain 2 turns of heat. For those of you who don't actually know what heat does, it's kind of a funky status effect. I've had an on and off relationship with this. Some days I think it's good, some days I think it's just kind of meh. Today I'm going to say it's good, because we can really take advantage of it. Heat will deal 1d4 fire damage to you every turn that you have it. Obviously, us having resistance to fire damage, that means we can only take a maximum of 2. Now that can affect our concentration though, so there is some way to get some armor that will like reduce flat damage to basically make it so you don't take damage from this. So basically, if you have fire resistance and you have any piece of armor that reduces damage by 2, then you don't take damage from this, which could be a useful strategy if you decide that the armor choices that I've gone for aren't really for you. But otherwise, I didn't really have to worry about the built-up heat damage too much. It just was kind of a minor annoyance at best. But basically the idea is you take 1d4 fire damage each turn, but can use something called Heat Convergence. Now the idea is that the more we attack, we're able to build up heat, and even though the tooltip isn't showing, which is a bit annoying, basically what Heat Convergence does is your next attack that deals fire damage will deal extra fire damage based on how many turns of heat that you have. So say you stacked up 5 turns of heat, you use Heat Convergence, and then basically you will deal an extra 5 damage on whatever that you just used. It's really, really good. So, well, the extra damage is good, the taking damage every turn, not so good. But yeah, I personally still think lightning charges are better, because lightning charges just give you a passive +1 damage and accuracy every turn, and then hit for a big 1d8, which is a roll, not a flat damage count, but you get the point. But yeah, no, heat can still work, and it fulfills a very specific class fantasy of like kind of overheating yourself, and I like to flavor this here as our literal flaming gun in our hand is getting a bit too hot to hold, but we're grasping onto it anyway because it's go time, baby. So that's kind of the point here. So yes, with heat, you're going to be able to deal big burst damage. Like I say, you can basically just load this thing up and then go bam. And as long as you have heat charges, you can proc heat convergence pretty much at any time. It's not like it hasn't really got a hard turn limit on it from what I understand. So really, heat is going to hit pretty damn hard if you're able to use it consistently, which we can. But another way of getting heat in the late game, which is probably going to be better for you since we're not really using a shield, you can take the Hellfire Great Axe. It's a two-handed weapon that deals an extra 1d6 of fire damage on attacks, and whenever you hit someone you gain 2 turns of heat, the same as the Thermodynamo Axe. But it also comes with the Hellflame Cleave cantrip. Do note that this is a cantrip. Deals an extra 2d6 fire damage on top of making a regular melee weapon attack, and this Hellfire damage ignores resistance and immunity to fire damage, so you can just beat straight through someone. Now, I will say, there is a reason to take the Thermodynamo Axe over the Hellfire Great Axe, and that is to use a shield, and since we're a ranged build, having the shield on just for a passive AC buff, we'd basically be sitting at like 21, 22 AC depending on the shield. That's actually really good, so honestly, don't discount having a shield on this build if you feel like you're not really using your melee attacks that often, which really, you shouldn't. So honestly, pick your favorite. But anyways, the main piece de resistance is the Hellfire Hand Crossbow, our literal flaming gun. You can possibly inflict burning while hitting a creature with this weapon while hiding or invisible. Unfortunately, not really something we're going to be able to take advantage of here, as we're not really a stealth build. We do have stealth proficiency and a decent dexterity score, so it is possible, but we're not a rogue, we're not hiding as a bonus action, so don't really expect to take advantage of this too often. Maybe it's like your opening shot if you stealth into combat. But it is a +2 weapon enchanted crossbow, one of the only ones in the game, hand crossbow I should say, so it's pretty good, as well as it's going to come with Scorching Ray shot, allowing you to cast Scorching Ray as a level 3 evocation spell at once per short rest, and yes, this does work with things like heat convergence and such, which can spread that damage out pretty damn well. However, you may notice something about the Hellfire Hand crossbow that is missing. That is the fact that despite being a literal flaming crossbow, it doesn't do fire damage natively on its own apart from Scorching Ray shot. So we are going to be buffing it with the Drakefruit Glaive. Been a while since I've done this. By buffing it with the Drakefruit Glaive, you're going to be able to add an additional 1d4 of fire damage. This means that every single shot that you do is going to deal fire damage as well, which is going to fuel some of our other abilities. So that is kind of essential. If you're doing a dual-wield crossbow build, make sure to have a sorcerer in the party, be it a hireling or whatever, that can twin cast the Drakefruit Glaive buff. Basically, if you have the 2 weapons on the floor, you can twin cast the Drakefruit Glaive buff to basically give both crossbows fire damage at the same time. It's a strategy I've used before in my builds. Please make sure to always check the description of these videos if you don't normally, as I do contain links to the wiki pages for all of the weapons so that you know where to get them and what they do. And in this case, it will show you the kind of exploit that you can use, twin casting the Drakefruit Glaive to be able to use dual crossbows. But again, I didn't need to worry about that on this build because we are not dual wielding crossbows by default, but if you decide to, make sure you do that. Moving on, we now have our first piece of equipment, the Hat of Fire Acuity. Whenever you deal fire damage, which obviously with a buffed Drakefruit Glaive buff crossbow, I'm going to be doing that all the time, you gain Arcane Acuity. Arcane Acuity is going to give you a bump to your spell attack rolls and spell difficulty class for each turn remaining. Now, while our arcane arrows do not use a spell attack roll, they do use a spell difficulty class for those effects, so things like the fairy fire, etc. So the more shots we build up, the more arcane acuity we build, because again, we just deal fire damage on every attack. We basically just get to build up Arcane Acuity for free, which means that our secondary effects from our arcane shots are much more likely to go off. So you definitely want to make sure that you're building this up as time goes on. Next up, the Send Them Off Cloak. Basically just punishes anyone for getting too close. Anybody who deals damage to us within 2 meters will receive the burning condition, meaning that they're going to be on fire, taking 1d4 fire damage every time. Basically spreading the heat that we're building up onto others, which I just think is a fun flavor choice, but really, you can put anything here. Now, for our armor, obviously I have gone with the Ballist armor here. This implies that this build is a little bit evil, which is why we've deviated away from calling this a Hellboy build, even though it is Hellboy inspired. Basically, the Aura of Murder will allow anyone within 3 meters to become vulnerable to piercing damage. Of course, all of our ranged shots deal some form of piercing damage, unless they are immune to it. I do find it interesting that immune has not been spelt properly in this description. Because it never used to say unless they are immune to it. This got changed in a later patch, but I've just realised a typo, because it's been a while since I've used this. But we also get a +2 bonus to initiative rolls, which is always nice. But basically, again, the idea is that once you've kind of, made it safe for yourself, you can run in there, basically point blank someone, dealing double piercing damage on every bit of piercing damage that we're dealing. Hunter's Mark, the base shot, etc. Heck, even the extra piercing damage from our piercing arrow, hence why I wanted to take it. And basically just point blank them. Oh, and even our Swarmkeeper. Our Swarmkeeper will do extra damage as well. God, there's so much piercing damage on this. And then basically the enemy will just explode. It's kind of the point. They just explode. But yeah, obviously the Ballist Armour will work pretty damn well for this. It does require you to be evil, and it kind of does require you to be a Dark Urge as well, so this could be a fun Dark Urge build for you, if you decide to go with that. Oh god, now that I think about it, the murderous energy of the Dark Urge being the big gun build. Oh, that actually sounds pretty cool. Okay, no, maybe I've unintentionally come up with something kind of cool here. Let me know what you think. But yeah, obviously the Ballist Armour works pretty well. Now, because we're a fighter, your early game armor option can be literally anything. But I will show off some stuff that I pulled from when this was originally a Hellboy build to kind of give you an idea. So, because the Hellboy build was originally part Barbarian, I did have medium armor here, but I would probably swap this to the Adamantine Splint Armor, which is the heavy armor version, because it comes with that incoming damage reduced by 2, whereas this one only reduces incoming damage by 1. But basically this can help offset the heat damage. If someone hits you with a melee attack, they are sent reeling, which means their subsequent attacks are less likely to hit, as well as critical hits can't be landed against you. Honestly, for a solid armor pick in the early game, Adamantine Scale Mail or Adamantine Splint Armor will both work. And I will say, because it's literally forged in like a lava, hellfire type thing, I mean it's just forged in lava, like in the special forge, it feels very hellish, but I feel like it fits the build. There's also the Flame Enameled Armor, which will give you a +2 bonus to your initiative rolls, resistance to fire damage, and a +2 bonus to saving throws, so if you don't already have that fire resistance, that's going to be great. And that +2 bonus to saving throws is just going to be really nice in general. Plus, you're also going to get the ability to use Fire Shield Warm, which will obviously allow you to create a fiery aura for yourself. Again, when this was a Hellboy build, this was meant to be his like transformation where he kind of gets that like spectral flaming image of his horns back, but obviously we're not doing that now, but heck, this can still work for this build either way. I will also say for some alternate head options, I mean the Heart of Fire Acuity is still obtained early enough that I think it's just not too much, there's not really much to say about getting an early game version, but you can also pick up things like the Marksmanship Hat to help offset Sharpshooter a bit more, or if you really want to lean into the Hellfire theme, the Helldusk Helmet is great. It gives you immunity to being blinded, meaning that you don't need to worry about people using darkness on you. The wielder will have a +2 bonus to saving throws again, really, really nice. Attacks can't land critical hits against you, and you also get Immolating Gaze, which means you can deal fire damage out of range and potentially frighten your target. Ultimately, it's just the end game powerful pick. Don't really need to go with it. I personally like Heart of Fire Acuity a bit more for this build. Now, one very important piece of this build is the Thermo-Arcanic Gloves. Whenever you deal fire damage, you gain 2 turns of heat. This is just basically, thanks to the Drakethroat Glaive buff, our most consistent way of generating heat. With the multiple shots that we'll be dealing each turn, we're just going to be building up heat incredibly quickly, meaning that we can go for those big heat conversion shots very consistently. And finally, we have the Boots of Speed here. This is just going to give us a bonus action dash that we can just use to kind of maneuver ourselves around the battlefield and get into a proper position, whether we're backing out to attack at range, or we're going in for a point-blank shot. Also, the kind of added benefit as opposed to a regular dash is that enemies will have disadvantage on opportunity attacks against us after we use this ability. So overall, I kind of see it as essential, so I definitely keep it on you for this build. Now, this is where things are going to get a little bit interesting. I did go with the Risky Ring on this build. This is just a catch-all that you will still have advantage on your attack rolls if you find that things like Seeking Arrow into Fairy Fire, etc., and all the other things that we can do to give ourselves advantage in other ways aren't really helping to offset Sharpshooter consistently enough. Basically, the Risky Ring is just guaranteed to give us advantage all of the time. However, I'm just kind of showing this off as kind of a free slot. Whereas the Risky Ring will allow you to have advantage in most situations, it obviously comes with the disadvantage on saving throws, which can be pretty detrimental. Now, even though I had a disadvantage on saving throws, I still never really failed my concentration saving throws on Hunter's Mark, so again, not really sure what's going on there, but really the Risky Ring is kind of a double-edged sword. It is going to give you a consistent source of advantage, but if you use this build correctly, you shouldn't need it. So really, this is a free slot. If you feel like that it's just doing more harm than good and everything else that you're working with is just giving you those shots consistently anyway, then don't take the Risky Ring. It's not needed on this build, really, if you play it right, but I figured I'd include it. It's just a catch-all in case the safety nets fail, right? Just make sure that you're still going to be able to get your shots off pretty consistently. But however, you can combine this with the Fey Semblance Amulet to give you advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, meaning that you're kind of cancelling out the disadvantage, at least on the mental side, so you only have to worry about the physical saving throws, which aren't as much of a big deal for us, because the main one we'd have to worry about is Constitution, which again, we've been passing pretty consistently regardless, or Dexterity, which again, we have high Dexterity, so it's not really a big deal either way. So yeah, but obviously if you're not trying to offset the Risky Ring, I do recommend the Moon Drop Pendant whenever the wearer has 50% hit points or less. They don't provoke opportunity attacks, so you can basically get out of a bad situation no matter what. So yeah, feel free to kind of play around with the equipment here and decide what works best for you, but either way, you can kind of swap out the Risky Ring for other things. I do like the Eversight Ring on this build as well, for again, if you want to kind of avoid blindness. Really, it's up to you. But our final one is the Killer Sweetheart, because you remember when I said I want to have a big bang attack? Not Vegeta's one, but you get the point. Whenever we kill a creature, your next attack roll will be a guaranteed critical hit once per long rest. Not exactly worded correctly though. What you actually get, which viewers of the channel will know this, is a reaction that you can spend at any time to turn any attack roll into a critical hit from that point forward. And again, you can do that once per long rest. So if you're up against a boss fight and you've killed one of his minions, you can go full point blank range and guarantee that you're going to get a critical hit. And that is a critical hit on every damage roll that we have put into that single attack. That includes Swarmkeeper stuff as well, used as a reaction. So you can fire a piercing arrow or a bursting arrow or whatever. That is guaranteed to get a critical hit. That does double on all the piercing damage, plus the extra damage that we've got. Yeah, this is the headshot. This is the boss's dead shot. Yeah, this is a pretty damn powerful effect to have. Even though it's only once per long rest, you save it for that critical moment, and it just feels so good. The only annoying thing is that you have to constantly tell the reaction to go away every time you make a shot, unless you are attacking the thing you want to attack. That can be a bit annoying. Really, it's up to you. But yeah, that is the build. Nothing really much else to say here. But before we wrap things up, let's talk about the fashion. As always, we're using Fear Taylor's Camp Clothing mod, although, to be honest, the default look still looks pretty good even without any dye, so honestly, you don't really need a modded camp clothing here, but I do like to use it. Well, I've gone for something pretty basic, the Ringmail Armour +1, because I never really get to show it off, and I actually really like it as like one of the base game armors. It's really good, but because of the stats are just never good, you never really see it. Mix that with the regular leather boots, I should say, and the leather gloves, and you've got a pretty solid outfit here that I really, really like. But yes, that is the build, and what else can I say? I think this is just a pretty solid overall Sharpshooter build that comes with a lot of fun flavor, a lot of interesting strategies, and a lot of freedom to kind of make the build how you want it. Again, getting 4 feats in the build is always awesome. Having the ability to choose your arcane shots and your ranger spells, and even your ranger features, just gives you that little bit of extra flavor and like ways to tweak it how you like it. And again, building up the heat mechanic using ranged crossbow attacks just feels so fun. Honestly, I'm kind of mad. I never thought about it before in the nearly 3 years I've been doing this. Is it nearly 3 years? Have I passed 3 years? I would have passed 3 years in September, right? Oh god, it's been 3 years. Huh. Anyways, but yeah. Overall, I really like this set. Obviously, I like my kind of Hellfire Pyromancer builds, and I just feel like this is kind of a different take on it. Now, obviously, this build is called the Hotshot. Unfortunately, the fire damage is not making up the bulk of what we do here. It is just kind of an after effect of heat, but it's still fun. You still get to do a bunch of fire spells, and again, you have things like the Seeking Arrow. You've just got so much cool little things going on here and there. And just everything this build does just comes together quite nicely, and I think it's quite well-rounded. I think it just does everything it needs to do, and it does it well. And honestly, I like any build that ends out on a flat 100 HP. That just makes my brain tingle. But yeah, overall, I'm quite happy with this one. I don't think it's like my most creative build out there, but I do think it satisfies a class fantasy that some people are going to have. And for those of you who did want the Hellboy build, I do apologize for not being able to do it justice. I think if I was to take another crack at it, I'm going to lean more into the investigative angle of him being a paranormal investigator. Maybe making it kind of a high intelligence and charisma build with like a little bit of barbarian, but maybe taking some of the monk levels out. I don't know, I'll really have to see, but I just wasn't happy with the result that I came up with, and I still wanted to get a video out relatively quickly, so I kind of just changed things last minute. But maybe I'll tackle Hellboy again in the future. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.